All right, so now we're going to do a short video on how to set the outside of the combine for corn and soybeans. We'll talk about both crops as we go around. So in the front, we got on our feeder house area and feed accelerator, we got 3 different items to change. We got our front drum position, which is set on both sides with these cams right here. So right now it's in the lowered position right here in this cam, and that's for soybeans. Now you would pull out this pin here, and then you would use a pry bar, lift up on the drum, and pull this up to the top for corn in the raised position. So corn is going to be the only crop you're really going to run it in the raised position. Soybeans, wheat, small grains, you're going to be in that low position.
And one of the reasons for that, so if you think about it, in corn we've got large ears that are going under that drum, okay? And typically we're not taking a lot of massive material in. Hopefully we're not taking a lot of the leaves and stalks in if we can help it. We'll talk about that in the corn head video. But in soybeans, we're taking a lot of material, and it's you got small stems and leaves and those kinds of things. And if you think about it, if my hands are this far apart, it takes that much stuff between my hands before I can grab and pull. Okay? If my hands are this far apart, then I have to have this much stuff between my hands before I can grab and pull. Same way with that drum position to the floor. If that drum is in the lowered position in soybeans, well, that means it only takes this much soybeans between that slat and that lower floor before I can grab and pull those soybeans. If I have the drum up, and again, I'm exaggerating here for illustration purposes, but if I have that drum up, it takes a lot more material to get under that drum before it can actually grab and pull it in. So by having that drum down, it allows that drum to take smaller bites and to keep that material smoothly flowing rather than waiting for more material to build up and grabbing and that I have to grab and pull. So it's going to be a little bit smoother feeding if I leave that down. Now, with 40 and 45 foot draper heads, you've got enough material coming in there. It may not make a whole lot of difference, but still the recommendation is to go ahead and put that drum in the lowered position. I know farmers that don't change it and don't have any problems, and hey, you know what, that's great. But if you're looking for a recommendation, put this in the lowered position for soybeans or any other small grain, and then put it in the up position for corn.
Also up here we have our sprocket selection to drive our conveyor change. That speed that that distance that we were setting here with the drum position, this drives that chain and that drum. So, and on the small sprocket, we're going to run that in corn and soybeans, and then the big sprocket, we're going to run that in wheat. Now, if you're in soybeans and you're in some really heavy bushy crop and it's back feeding through the front feed drum and back into the belts or plugging your feeder house, one thing you can do to help improve that is put that in that fast speed to get that crop material up to that feed accelerator that much quicker. So our next adjustment is up here is our feed accelerator. So this is a lever to loosen it. We're just going to raise it up and change it. You got 2 different pulleys back in here with a belt. You got to switch the belt to the inside or the outside. We're going to have it on the inside for fast. That's going to be fast for the feed accelerator on the inside. For soybeans and wheat, we're going to put it out here on the bigger pulley for slow down for corn. You got a nice sticker right here that shows you the small pulley up front is going to be for fast, and the big pulley on the outside is for slow.
Now, I do have some seed bean growers that don't like to put their feed accelerator in the fast position for fear of damage. Again, I haven't really seen, and it makes a tremendous amount of difference that you can really document that going from fast to slow does a lot of extra damage or really any more damage in here. But again, the perception is there that if I run that in the slow speed, that I'm going to do less damage, and that is true. The slower you can run something, the less cracking, the less damage you potentially are going to do. If the beans are dead ripe, if the stalks are dead dry, the pods are dry, then you most likely you can get away with that. When you start getting into green stem beans that still have, again, these beans are being bred to stay alive longer. We're putting fungicides on them, and those kinds of things to keep that plant health where we want it, to increase that yield. But that's going to make it tougher for that machine to pull that in. The faster you can run that drum, the smaller bites it's going to take. The slower you run that drum, the bigger bites it's going to take. So again, if you start running some green material in there, potentially in that slow speed, you can actually slug that feed accelerator. But again, if it's working for you on your farm by leaving it in the slow position, hey, that's great. And you're seeing that maybe you're being able to see a small percentage of fewer cracks in those seed beans. And hey, by all means, continue to do what's working for you. Just keep those other things in mind as we go around some of these adjustments.
So there is an optional feeder house slowdown kit. That's really it changes both pulleys, the drive and the driven. That's really for high moisture corn. It allows our feed accelerator just to go that much slower in the slow position. That way we prevent less grain damage for that high moisture corn. So keep in mind, they are different belts, but there are two different options there. You can also get some smooth wear strips on the feed accelerator wings itself. That also helps with that grain damage as well. So if you're 25 plus moisture corn harvester, highly recommend that slowdown kit and those smooth bars on the feed accelerator. So now we're on the right hand side of the machine. So any 680, 690, 780 or 790, we're going to have our rethresher here. So to set our rethresher, we're going to be in the up position for corn and soybeans, and we're going to be in the lower position for any small grains. That's where our tailings comes through that we'll talk about later in our crop flow. It comes up and it comes through here. There's just an old cylinder, like concave and threshing cylinder in here, and that processes that crop and then dumps it back into the inside of the machine. So we want to make sure we have that in the up position for corn and soybeans, in that low position for small grains. All right, we'll come back around to the back side of the machine. We got the cob deflector door. You're going to have that open for corn, and we're going to close that down for soybeans and wheat, small grains. It's very important to have that in the corn position, or those corn cobs will kick back up into the inside of the combine and damage your chaffer element. So if you see a bunch of corn cobs stuck in your chaffer, good chance you got your corn cob deflector in the wrong position.
So one thing that can do is if that goes on long enough, you'll actually damage your chaffer. So as that chopper is turning, it's throwing most of the cobs out the back, but it will also carry some of them around, and like Chris mentioned, it'll pitch them back forward. And those things are traveling really fast when they come out of that chopper going back forward. That cob deflector door is there for those cobs to hit and fall back down. If that is up out of the way in the soybean or the wheat position, it will throw those cobs back forward, and those little delicate chaffer fingers will get bent over. It'll bend them over and flatten them out, and your chaffer will no longer function. So that's something it's extremely critical to make sure that is in the corn position. Now, conversely, in soybeans, what we're going to do is when we go to soybeans, we actually flip that door up and out of the way. And what that allows us to do is it opens that opening going into the chopper, because I've got those nice long bean stems. And what can happen is if I've got that cob deflector door down like this, those bean stems can bridge here, okay? And it never gets to the chopper. So you never get a slow chopper speed warning. It's going to fill up inside the back of the machine here. And the next thing that you're going to have stop or give you a low speed warning is going to be your discharge beater. And that's a very large area between the chopper and the discharge beater that's going to fill up. So it is important to change that from crop to crop. It's in the corn position for corn only, and pretty much every other crop you're going to want to have that in the open soybean position. So now we're at our chopper. Okay, so there's some adjustments we're going to need to make when we switch from that corn to bean changeover. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we've got this T-handle. So we're going to open our door with our latch down here. We're going to flip that door down, and we're going to put this chopper in one of two positions. We're either going to put it to the inside position, which is going to be the slow position. There is also a decal on the door to explain that. That's going to be the slow speed, which is going to be where we're going to want it for corn. There is a neutral. Okay, we'll talk about power shutdowns later, or if you want a windrow in a wheat situation, there is a neutral. If you want to have that chopper opened up and out of the way, you can put it in neutral, which is where you're going to need it. If you leave that in gear when you open your chopper, you're going to get a warning in the cab, and it's going to shut the separator off if this is in gear and the chopper is not in the down position. The last position is all the way out. That's going to be the high side, and I'd recommend that's where we start when we want to do wheat or soybeans or some small grain. It has to be in slow for corn, and then we typically recommend you start in the out or high position for soybeans. I'll go ahead and close this up.
So that's why Lucas is doing that. We'll talk about why we want that in slow for corn. We don't want those hammer knives to wear out beating those cobs out the back of the chopper. So the slower they go, not as hard. How do I want to say this? It's not hitting the cobs as hard and not damaging the chopper knives as much. So that's why we put that in slow for corn. And then soybeans and wheat, we want that chopper spin as fast as we can so we can process that material as best as we can and have a nice even spread coming out of the back of the combine.
So the other adjustment on our chopper back here is our stationary knife. Okay, so I've got this big wing nut here, and I'll loosen that up. And then I've got this handle right here to where I'll make that adjustment. So in corn, I need that handle all the way up, which is going to pull those knives out. And again, as Chris mentioned, if those knives are not out when I'm in corn, those cobs will be very damaging to that stationary knife, and it can break some of the knives off and damage other parts of that stationary knife. So in corn, I want my knives out, and I want my my chopper in the slow speed position. For soybeans, okay, I loosen my wing nut, I pull down on the handle to push that stationary knife in. The farther I push that knife in, the more horsepower it's going to take from the combine to run the chopper. However, the farther I push that in, the more it's going to process those stems and things like that when I'm running soybeans through there, or wheat, or whatever crop it might be. But typically what I recommend to guys is they go to the high side for soybeans, and then they go halfway in with their knives. Doing that is a good place to start, and then you can hop out and you can evaluate what your residue looks like. If you need more processing, you can go ahead and push those knives in further. If you think that the processing is plenty good enough and you're maybe a little bit limited with horsepower, you could pull those knives halfway or all the way out to maybe not put quite as much horsepower requirements out of the chopper.
In soybeans, I would never pull the knives all the way out. You want just the tip of the knife to still be sticking through the floor. That way the crop doesn't hairpin in that gap in that floor. It passes over the knife instead of hairpinning and plugging in those gaps and then kind of bridging that chopper inlet or the chopper floor. So we always want to have that knife slightly in soybeans so we don't cause any unnecessary plugging or wearing out of that chopper floor. When we're setting our rotor speed, we got this handle here. We can pull it in or out depending on what gear we want. We have three options. We have first gear, neutral, and high second gear. So for first gear or slow speed, we're going to run that in corn. Neutral would be for any maintenance or if you plug the rotor or something, you need to spin that out by hand. And second gear is mainly for soybeans and wheat, small grains. You can run in first gear, you're going to get up to around 500, 520 RPM. And then second gear, you're going to be on the upper ends of 1,000 RPM. If you got a guy that's got some really dry soybeans and seed beans, maybe you'd run that in the low speed on the very upper end so you don't damage those soybeans. If they're very easy threshing, we don't want no splits or nothing. We would run that on the fastest setting in first gear. There is a little overlap, so you should be able to get to that in second gear. But most of the time in soybeans, you're going to run that in that second gear.
So now notice how we got these spacers in here. That lets the rotor actually pinch, pull, and release the crop. I do know some folks, they actually leave the spacer out in the second one. So the front one has the spacers, the second one does not have the spacers, and then this one would have the spacers. On a 780 and a 790, I cannot put spacers in the back one because of my tailings return cross auger right here. So I can't actually do that on the back. What they have said is they think that kind of makes some kind of turbulence in the crop flow and it helps separate a little bit more grain. I'm not really proving that it's really helped or taken away from the performance of the combine, but if you're finding that it's working for you, again, that's up to you. It's your combine. You can do it however you want, but I have seen them spacers in, spacers out, spacers in, or you can have the spacers in all of them. Now this is for corn and soybeans. If you're going to do some kind of small grains, you're going to want to make sure and take those spacers out and put them back on top. so that this is all the way up together. So I have more aggressive pull of that crop material through the machine, just because wheat or some of those other cereal grains have a lot more material coming through the machine.
Thanks for watching, coming out with us today in our combine series. If you haven't done so, go back and watch some of our other videos, such as concave leveling, power shutdown, crop flow, combine settings adjust. Feel like there's a lot of valuable information out there we can share with you.
Yep. So again, thanks for watching, and we appreciate it. Again, if you got any specific questions, don't be afraid to call your local Sloan implement dealer. They can help you with any specific questions that you might have. And again, we wish you a safe and successful harvest.